You know, every single day, we hear these huge, mind-boggling numbers thrown around about the economy. Trillions of this, billions of that. But what do they actually mean? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the biggest numbers of all, a country's economic output. Let's dive in. So let's start with the big question. How in the world do you measure the economic health of an entire country? I mean, you've got millions of people buying, selling, and creating things every single day. It sounds almost impossible to track, right? Well, luckily, economists have a pretty clever answer for this. It's a concept called output, and the official definition is right here: the total monetary value of all final goods and services produced in an economy during a given time period. Now, I know that sounds a little academic, but trust me, every word in that sentence is super important. So let's break it down piece by piece. First things first, what are we even measuring? Well, if you boil it all down, any economy really only produces two basic things. On one side, you've got goods. These are the physical, tangible things you can actually touch. Cars, cement, a bushel of wheat. And on the other side, you've got services. These are the intangible things you can't really hold, but that are incredibly valuable. Think banking, insurance, or your education. Economic output is simply the total money value of all of that stuff added together. But it's not quite that simple. We can't just go around adding up the price tag of everything we see. To get a number that's actually accurate, we have to follow a few really crucial rules. And this is the big one. Rule number one, we only count final goods. And there's a very good reason for this. It's to avoid a huge mistake that economists call double counting. Let me show you what that means. Okay, just picture how a simple loaf of bread gets to your kitchen table. First, you have a farmer who grows and sells some wheat, then a miller buys that wheat and grinds it into flour, and finally, a baker buys the flour and bakes it into that nice, fresh loaf of bread you buy at the store. So here's the million-dollar question. To calculate our economic output, do we add up the value of the wheat, plus the value of the flour, plus the final price of the bread? What do you think would happen if we did that? The answer is a huge no. Absolutely not. Because if we did that, we'd actually be counting the value of that original wheat 3 separate times. It got counted once by itself, a second time when it was part of the flour's price, and a third time inside the price of the bread. So the key takeaway is we only count the final product, the bread, because its price already has the value of all those other steps baked right in. All right, on to rule number 2. We do not include the sale of secondhand goods. And the logic for this one is actually pretty straightforward. Think about it this way. If you buy a used car that was built back in 2020, its value was already counted in the economic output for 2020. If we counted it again when it was sold this year, that's just double counting again. But, and this is the clever part, the fee you pay to the used car dealer is counted in this year's output. Why? Because the dealer provided a totally new service, the service of finding the car and connecting the buyer and seller, and that service was produced this year. Makes sense, right? Okay, our third and final rule is all about drawing a line on the map. We're not just measuring any output, we're measuring domestic output. And that word domestic has a very specific meaning. Domestic means anything and everything produced inside the geographical borders of a country. The key word here is inside. It doesn't matter who owns the factory or who's providing the service. It could be a local citizen, a foreign citizen, a private company, the government, even a giant multinational corporation. If it was made within the country's territory, it counts. Location is everything. So now we've got the rules for counting down. But this is where things get really fascinating. It turns out that this big number, output, is really just one side of what you could call a 3-sided coin. Let's just take this number for a second. 12,250 rupees. Let's pretend this is the total value of everything that a tiny, simple economy produced. So first off, we know this number represents the total market value of all the final goods and services. This is the output we've been talking about this whole time. But hang on a second. To make all that stuff, companies had to pay for things, right? They had costs, like wages for workers and rent for their buildings. And here's the twist. The total cost to produce everything in that economy adds up to the exact same number, 12,250 rupees. And here's the last piece of the puzzle. Where did all that money for the costs actually go? Well, it went into people's pockets. It became someone's wages, someone's rent, someone else's profit. So, you guessed it, the total income earned by everyone in the economy is also the exact same number. This is a fundamental truth in economics. Every single rupee of output has to become a rupee of cost, which then has to become a rupee of income for someone. Output, cost, and income are just three different windows you can look through to see the exact same economic activity. It's a perfect closed loop.
Okay, so we've looked at all the basic ingredients, we've gone over all the rules of counting. Let's put it all together one last time for the final complete definition.
So there it is, the whole shebang. And now every part of that definition should make perfect sense. We know why it has to be final goods. We know what domestic territory means. All those little details are what make this number so powerful. So now we have this amazing tool for measuring an entire country's production. It's a snapshot of what that country made. But I want to leave you with one last, really important question to think about. What does this big number not tell us? What might a number that only measures production be missing when it comes to the actual well-being of the people who live there? That's a story for another day. Thanks so much for tuning in.